If your electric bill jumps $200 the second summer hits, I need you to hear this. You are paying a machine to fight a war it never had to start. There is a way to cool your entire home to 55 degrees that costs $300 one time, not $300 a month, and it has been sitting under American backyards this whole time. Stick with me for the next few minutes because by the end of this video, you are going to know exactly how to build it yourself and exactly why nobody showed you sooner. Subscribe before you keep watching because by the end of this, you'll wonder why nobody showed you this sooner. 55 degrees, 6 feet under your backyard right now. Today, the soil sits at roughly 55 degrees. It sat at 55 degrees in January. It will sit at 55 degrees in August. It does not care about a heat wave. It does not care about a cold front. While the air above ground swings 40, 50, 60 degrees across a single year, the ground just past your reach stays almost perfectly still. Think about what that actually means for a second. Your air conditioner spends every single day fighting the same battle. It pulls in hot air, runs it across a coil filled with refrigerant, compresses that refrigerant, and dumps the heat back outside, over and over, all day, every day, for months. That takes electricity, a lot of it. That's why your bill spikes the second the temperature does. Your AC is not cooling your house for free. It's manufacturing cold air from scratch every single time, and you are paying for every cycle. The ground does not do that. The ground does not manufacture anything. It already is 55 degrees. It was 55 degrees before you were born, and it will be 55 degrees after your air conditioner has been replaced 3 more times. All you have to do is move air past it long enough to pick up that temperature and bring that air into your home. That is the entire idea. No refrigerant, no compressor, no chemical process, just air, traveling through a pipe, through ground that is already cold for free. Now let's actually compare these two systems side by side, because the gap is bigger than most people realize. A central air conditioner will run you somewhere between $4,000 and $8,000 to install, depending on the size of your home. After that, you are paying for electricity every single month it runs. You are paying for a service call every year to keep it running properly. And on average, that unit is going to last you somewhere between 15 and 20 years before it needs to be replaced entirely. That is the system most of us grew up trusting completely. A buried air pipe, what people are calling an earth tube, costs somewhere between $250 and $400 in materials. The only power it uses is a small fan, and that fan pulls less electricity than a single light bulb running in your hallway. There is no refrigerant to leak, no compressor to burn out, almost nothing to service. And because it is just plastic pipe sitting underground, away from sun, rain, and weather, it can last 50 years or more without needing to be touched. Same job, a fraction of the cost, a fraction of the upkeep. If a storm knocks your electricity out for a few hours, your central air system stops cooling completely. Full stop, no matter how hot it is outside. A system like this, because it draws so little power to begin with, can often keep running off a small battery or a basic backup power source for hours, sometimes days, while your neighbor's whole house heats up the second the grid goes down. That is not a small detail if you live somewhere that loses power during summer storms. The only thing standing between you and that system right now is that nobody ever told you it existed. And that part bothers me, honestly, because this is not new information. This is not something I discovered. This is something entire communities have been quietly doing for 200 years, while the rest of us were taught that cold air only comes from a machine you buy at a store. Walk through any older Amish farm in Ohio or Pennsylvania, and you will find a root cellar dug 10 feet into the ground, no insulation, no electricity, holding a steady cool temperature all year long, used to keep produce fresh through entire seasons. You will find spring houses, small buildings built directly over a natural underground spring, where the constantly flowing cold water keeps the air inside that building cold enough to store dairy without a single watt of power. Some older farmhouses were even built with clay pipe systems running beneath the foundation, letting outside air travel through the cool earth before rising up through the floorboards into the living space, cooling the home from below without a single moving part. These are not relics. These are not museum pieces. These buildings are in active use today, right now, doing the exact same job they did 200 years ago, because the physics behind them never stopped working. The reason these methods feel unfamiliar to you has almost nothing to do with whether they work. They work. They have always worked. The reason they feel unfamiliar is that an entire industry grew up around selling you a machine instead. And once that industry existed, it shaped almost everything that came after it. The codes your home was built under, the training your local building inspector received, the assumptions your contractor walked in with, all of it grew up around mechanical cooling, because that is what was being sold, taught, and standardized for the better part of a century. Nobody sat you down and lied to you directly. The information just never made it into the room. And there is a real difference between information being hidden and information simply never being included in the conversation in the first place. Either way, you ended up the same way. Without it. So before we get into exactly how to build this yourself, step by step in your own backyard, I want to ask you something honestly, because I want to know if I'm the only one who feels this way. Do you think most homeowners would actually take on a project like this themselves if the information was laid out clearly? Or do you think most people would still call someone else and pay full price, even knowing a cheaper option exists? Put your answer in the comments, because I genuinely want to see where people land on that. And if you are someone who would rather learn how to do this yourself than keep paying someone else to manage your comfort for you, that is exactly who this channel is built for. Subscribe right now, because what I'm about to walk you through next is the exact build, piece by piece, and I am not going to slow down to repeat it. Let's get into the build itself. I'm going to walk you through it exactly the way you would do it in your own yard. The first thing you need is space, and you need less of it than you think. You do not need an acre. You do not need to tear up your whole backyard. A side yard works. A strip of land running along a fence line works. Even a narrow gap between your house and a property line is enough, as long as you have somewhere between 100 and 200 feet of room to run a trench. If you have a yard at all, you almost certainly have enough room to do this. Before you dig anything, it's worth confirming what is actually happening underground at your own house, because ground temperature can shift slightly depending on your soil type and how much shade your yard gets. A simple way to check is to drive a long probe thermometer down as far as you can. Leave it for a few minutes and see what it reads. It will not be perfectly scientific, but it will tell you whether you are dealing with the 55-degree range we have been talking about or something a few degrees warmer or cooler, so you know what to expect before you commit a weekend to digging. Step 1 is digging the trench, and the depth matters more than almost anything else in this entire project. You are aiming for 6 feet down. That is the depth where the ground stops reacting to the seasons and locks into that steady 55-degree range we talked about earlier. Go shallower than that, and you are still in the zone where the ground heats and cools with the surface, which defeats the entire purpose. 6 feet is not a suggestion. It is the line between a system that works and a system that barely does anything. Step 2 is choosing your pipe, and this is where a lot of people make their first expensive mistake. You want smooth wall pipe, either HDPE or PVC, somewhere between 6 and 8 inches in diameter. Do not use corrugated pipe. I know it is cheaper, and I know it is what shows up first when you search for it, but corrugated pipe has ridges, and those ridges trap moisture and condensation along the inside of the pipe. Trapped moisture breeds mold, and mold is the last thing you want blowing into the air you breathe inside your own home. Smooth wall pipe lets condensation slide through and drain out instead of pooling. This single choice is the difference between a system that gives you cleaner air than your current AC or one that quietly makes your air worse. Step 3 is the slope. As you lay that pipe into the trench, you want a gentle slope, roughly a 2% grade, angled toward a drain point. This matters for the exact same reason as the pipe choice. Any moisture that does form inside that pipe needs somewhere to go. If the pipe is laid flat, that moisture just sits there. If it is sloped correctly, gravity does the work for you, and the system stays dry and clean on its own, year after year, without you ever having to think about it. Step 4 is the bedding. Lay your pipe on a bed of sand inside the trench before you bury it. Sand keeps the pipe in full, even contact with the surrounding earth, which is exactly what lets the pipe pull that 55-degree temperature as efficiently as possible. Skipping this step does not break the system, but it does weaken it, and after putting in this much work, there is no reason to leave performance on the table. Step 5 is your 2 connection points. On one end, above ground, you need an intake with a simple screen over it, just enough to keep out leaves, insects, and small debris, and ideally raised a little off the ground so it is not pulling in surface dust every time the wind kicks up. On the other end, the pipe connects into your home, usually through a basement wall or a crawl space, and at that connection point you want a simple air filter, something in the MERV 13 range, along with a small inline fan. That fan is doing one job, gently pulling air through the length of that buried pipe and pushing it into your living space. And here is the number that should genuinely surprise you. That fan typically draws somewhere between 50 and 80 watts. A single incandescent light bulb in your home can use more power than that. You are cooling your entire living space using less electricity than it takes to light one room. One more thing I want to mention here, because it matters for your peace of mind. You do not need to remove your existing air conditioner to do any of this. You are not betting your whole summer on a new system you have never tested. Leave your current unit exactly where it is, fully connected, fully functional. Build this alongside it, run it on its own, and see how much of the work it takes off your existing system. Most people find they barely need to turn their old AC on at all once this is running, but it is still sitting there, ready if you ever need it. Air that travels 100 to 200 feet through ground locked at 55 degrees comes out noticeably cooler than the air went in, typically landing somewhere in the mid-60s to low 70s, even on a brutally hot day outside. And it is not just cooler, it is drier too. As that air moves through the pipe, condensation along the walls naturally pulls humidity and airborne particles out of it, so what reaches your living room is both cooler and cleaner than what went in. Total materials for this entire system typically run around $300. The pipe itself, laid properly, can last 50 to 100 years underground. Compare that to the central air system most of us are used to, which needs replacing every 15 to 20 years, and the math stops being close. This version, the simple air through a pipe version, works beautifully in dry and moderate climates. If you are in Ohio, Pennsylvania, Indiana, Colorado, the Texas Hill Country, or most of the Midwest, this build, exactly as I just described it, is going to perform extremely well with very little fuss. If you are in a high humidity climate, somewhere like coastal Florida or the Gulf Coast, you need to manage moisture more carefully. And there is a smarter version built specifically for that, which we are getting into in the next part of this video. If this breakdown actually gave you something useful, something you could picture yourself doing in your own yard this weekend, type the word build in the comments below. I want to see how many of you are actually planning to do this, because that tells me exactly what to walk you through next. And if you have not subscribed yet, this is the moment to do it, because the next part covers exactly what to do if you live somewhere humid, where this build needs to be adjusted. And I'm not going to make a separate video just to repeat it. Now let's talk about what to do if you live somewhere humid, because the last thing I want is for you to build this system only to deal with moisture problems you were never warned about. If you are in a high humidity climate, the fix is simple, and it actually makes the system more reliable, not less. Instead of running outside air directly through the buried pipe, you run a closed loop of water mixed with a small amount of glycol, the same antifreeze used in a car radiator. That liquid circulates through the buried pipe, picks up the ground's steady 55-degree temperature, then passes through a small heat exchanger inside your home where it cools the air in your living space. No outside air ever touches the buried pipe directly. That one change removes the condensation problem completely because there is no humid air being pulled through the pipe in the first place, only a sealed liquid loop. This version also solves a second problem that has nothing to do with weather. It solves a paperwork problem. Because this version uses a sealed liquid loop running through standard plumbing fittings, it typically falls under existing plumbing code in most areas, rather than HVAC code. That means no confused inspector trying to figure out where a buried air pipe fits into a rule book that was never written with it in mind. It is plumbing. It already has a box to check. Total materials for this version typically run between $400 and $700. Still a fraction of a central air install, and still something most people can put in over a weekend or two. Mistakes that actually ruin this system, because I would rather you hear these now than find out the hard way after you have already dug a trench. Mistake number 1, using corrugated pipe instead of smooth wall. I mentioned this earlier, but it is worth repeating because it is the single most common mistake people make, almost always because corrugated pipe is cheaper and easier to find. Do not make that trade. The ridges trap moisture, the moisture breeds mold, and mold inside a pipe that feeds air directly into your home is a problem you do not want to discover after the fact. Mistake number 2, skipping the slope. If your trench is laid flat instead of angled toward a drain point, any condensation that forms has nowhere to go. It just sits inside the pipe. Over time, that standing moisture becomes exactly the kind of environment mold loves. A 2% grade takes almost no extra effort during installation and prevents this completely. Mistake number 3, burying the pipe too shallow. If you stop at 3 or 4 feet instead of going the full 6, you are still inside the zone where ground temperature swings with the seasons above it. Your system will technically still move air, but it will not deliver anywhere close to that 55-degree performance, and you will end up disappointed in a system that actually works perfectly fine, just not at the depth you gave it. Mistake number 4, skipping the intake screen. Without it, you are inviting insects, debris, and small animals directly into the same pipe that feeds air into your living room. It is a small, cheap piece of mesh, and skipping it creates a much bigger problem than it solves. Mistake number 5, undersizing the fan. If the fan you choose is too weak to move enough air through 100 or 200 feet of pipe, you will not feel a meaningful difference inside your home, and you may end up blaming the entire system for a problem that was really just one underpowered part. Mistake number 6, forgetting to plan your drain point before you start digging. Whatever moisture does collect at the low end of that sloped pipe has to go somewhere. Whether that is into a gravel pit, a French drain, or simply daylight it out to a lower point in your yard. If you do not plan that ahead of time, you end up with standing water at the worst possible spot in the system, right where the pipe meets your house. Every one of these mistakes is avoidable, and every one of them is the difference between a system that genuinely changes how your home feels in the summer and a system that quietly underperforms and gets blamed for design flaws it never actually had. 6 feet under your backyard right now, while you are watching this, it is 55 degrees. It will be 55 degrees tomorrow. It will be 55 degrees the day your current air conditioner finally gives out and needs to be replaced again. The ground has been doing this job consistently, for free, this entire time. The only thing that changed today is that you now know exactly how to use it. A trench 6 feet deep, smooth wall pipe sloped 2% toward a drain, a screened intake on one end, a filter and a small fan on the other. Roughly $300 for the simple version, closer to $400 to $700 for the closed loop version if you are somewhere humid. That is the entire system. There is no missing piece, no trick, no catch. I want to ask you one more thing before you go, and I want an honest answer in the comments. If you had known about this 5 years ago, before your last air conditioner purchase or your last big repair bill, do you think you would have built this instead? Or do you think most people, even knowing all of this, would still choose the easier, more expensive option just because it is more familiar? I am curious where you actually land on that, so tell me honestly below. If this video saved you from a future repair bill, or just gave you something you did not have 10 minutes ago, do 3 things for me right now. Subscribe so you do not miss what is coming next. Drop a comment with the state you are watching from and what your air conditioner actually costs you to run in the summer, because I read every single one. And if you know somebody, a parent, a neighbor, somebody who complains about their electric bill every single summer without fail, send this to them directly, because this is exactly the kind of thing they need to see before next summer hits, not after. This channel exists for exactly this reason, taking things that used to work perfectly well, long before any of us were born, and showing you they still work today, usually better than whatever you have been sold to replace them. Next time, we are going into water, specifically a filtration method that needs no electricity and no replacement filters ever, and once you see how it works, you are going to wonder why that one was not common knowledge either. Subscribe now so you are here for it.